Thursday episode of the 905 Roundup with me, Roland Tanner.
I am Joel McLeod.
And we're welcoming back today two of our favourite regulars. First of all, Laura Steiner from the Milton Reporter, senior reporter at the Milton Reporter. Welcome back, Laura.
Thanks. Good to be here.
And also we have Alan Can, who is the editor of the Munipoli Matters Substack website, and general local political rabble-rouser, is he tells me, which are the best kind of rousers, we believe. Welcome back, Alan.
Thank you very much, Roland. Nice to be here.
And we thought that, we started off the kind of municipal election season earlier this week, just with a kind of roundup of what had been happening, in particular in Hamilton. I mean, a general look. We were looking at Vaughan, but we certainly took quite a bit of a look at Burlington and Hamilton as well. And Laura and Alan are very much our kind of experts in other parts of Halton and in Peel and York, and indeed across the country. And so we thought we would invite them back to kind of give us an update on what's been happening in those regions of the 905. So Laura, why don't you start us off first? I mean, it looks like there's actually some interesting races kind of bubbling up in Milton. It somewhat unexpectedly, Milton looks like it might be one of the more interesting elections this municipal season.
Yeah. So I think the biggest headline is Mayor Krantz is running, or Mayor Krantz will run again. I think we've known this since March. Practically, he announced it at
March
the mayor's
1965.
Breakfast. The headline, yeah. But the headline is he's getting an opponent. He's got an opponent. Ward 4 regional Ward 4 councillor Zishan Hamid has thrown his proverbial hat in the ring, and there's two others whose names I'm not familiar with, that are going to contest the mayor's race.
I guess the why. So Zishan Hamid is kind of interesting because he's already an incumbent. He's someone who's won an election, and so he very often when we look at municipal races, and we don't get excited when there's a bunch of candidates who we've never heard of before, who've never run for office before, running against someone like Gordon Krantz.
Yeah.
So you obviously give a bit more credibility, I guess, to someone like Councillor Hamid.
Yeah.
Well, it should also be pointed out here, though, that Gordon Krantz, if I'm not mistaken, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but he's the longest serving sitting mayor in Ontario to date. Like I don't know if he's beaten Hazel McCallion's record, but
he's beaten Hazel McCallion.
Yeah, so I mean, like that in itself is a bit of an accomplishment that you're constantly being reelected to the mayorship. However, I do think this race is a bit interesting because, if I'm not mistaken, Hamid has a credible shot at ousting Mayor Krantz from office. Am I right or am I wrong about that?
My sense is yes. There's a path to it, but of course the dominoes are going to have to fall exactly right. But it would be a mistake to sort of write Councillor Hamid off. But for the sake of argument, yes. I've spoken with there's been like little chats. We get to talking politics with the people who aren't really as engaged in a non-election year, and there's starting to be a bit of a buzz that Mayor Krantz shouldn't be running again. He's really not. He's kind of not the mayor that Milton should have as a growing community. And when you get, and it's sort of, the buzz has been kind of building by election the last couple of times. And when you get some people who aren't as engaged in politics talking like that, then yeah, there's definitely a shot and a way through.
Alan, I saw you waved your
Yeah.
hand there a minute. Do you
Yeah,
want to chime in?
yeah, definitely. Because what Laura said is very clear and concise. Because Milton now will have a very clear and distinct competing visions, if you will, between what the town is, and I guess, and what the town wants to be. And I think Councillor Hamid is on the side of what the town should be and wants to be going forward in the future. And whatever Mayor Krantz represents, it's I guess the same old, same old. I'd be interested to see how Mayor Krantz's style of campaigning contrasts with Councillor Hamid's. Councillor Hamid obviously has a more modern outlook on this. He's got a whole website. He is on social media, whereas I understand Mayor Krantz may not have a landline to speak of. So
He has a landline.
but there's an interesting historical precedent here. Councillor Hamid will be the third sitting councillor, or former councillor that I am aware of that has tried to run against Mayor Krantz. Mayor Krantz in 1997 beat current regional councillor Colin Best. In 2003, he beat Councillor Rick Malbuff, both of whom of those gentlemen have recently acclaimed to their council seats because nobody filed to run against them last the August 19th deadline.
Alan, I did want to ask you, and I alluded to that in my previous statement about the comparisons, obviously, between Gord Krantz and Hazel McCallion. The idea is, like, if you've been in office for that long, you've seen so much. You've seen so many changes, so many elections. You've addressed probably numerous issues over your years in office in many elections. Is there? Are we just going to see is Gord Krantz basically like the new modern, if you will, Hazel McCallion, where he kind of he'll get the chance to leave. He'll leave on his own terms. When he says I'm done, I will leave. The people won't decide for me.
Well, that's what we're going to have to see going in the election in October. But my understanding is, and I don't know Milton as well as I do in Mississauga, Hazel McCallion in Mississauga was, whether you agree with her or not, she was at least a fighter. She fought for the city. The legendary stories are that like premiers would cower at the sight of Hazel coming to Queen's Park. I mean, it was just that sort of intimidating presence that Mayor McCallion had over almost 4 decades running one of Canada's largest cities. And Mayor Krantz, from the people I've spoken to, does not express that sort of fighting spirit, with all due respect, that I think some of his detractors would have wanted him to say. I'm not going to reveal who I spoke to, but they told me that when it's around like Halton Regional Council, you have mayors like Oakville's Rob Burton and Burlington's Mary Ann Mead Ward. Whether you agreed with them or not, they were fighting for their municipalities. Like, take a look at the recent decision to freeze the urban boundary in the Halton region. I believe that Mayors Burton and Mead Ward fought for that. I do believe Mayor Krantz fought against that, but I don't think he was as vocal as those 2 other mayors. And with all due respect, when you're 85 years old, I don't think one has the energy sometimes. I mean, Hazel McCallion may be an exception, but, when you're at that point in your life, maybe just fighting like your life depends on it is not something that is that inherent anymore. And I get the sense that Councillor Hamid has a bit of more of that fighting drive. His website says that I'm going to fight for Milton. That's like one of the first lines that I saw. And that might be one of the talking points going into this campaign.
He's certainly someone. I mean, full disclosure, I had a little bit of prior knowledge of Councillor Hamid just through a friend of a friend. I don't know him, but I just knew of him before he announced he was running. And he's certainly an interesting character. Like, I mean, before he decided to run, he's someone who was like, I think he rode motorbikes around Lake Superior or something like this earlier this year or last year, something like that. So certainly someone who had come to my attention as not your run-of-the-mill councillor anyway, because with the greatest respect, usually that's a phrase that's synonymous with no respect at all. And when I say it, most councillors are kind of boring, let's face it. If they were that interesting, they probably wouldn't be councillors. And it struck me as like, oh, this is an interesting person with interesting, some of his tweets, which were just not your regular run-of-the-mill kind of boring, for want of better words, political comments that many councillors will make. So it was interesting, having already kind of formed that opinion. Oh, this is someone who's a little bit interesting, to see him throwing his hat into the ring. And I mean, you've got to reckon, Krantz, if there's only 2 elections, time for a change in 4 more years, there can never be more of a time for a change election.
No.
when the mayor is in his 80s.
And that's another side of it too, because the other thing I've been kind of hearing now and again through the last 2 years is he's not really around when he's not really visible when you need that leadership through the pandemic. I mean, some of the other councillors would put out statements and would be visible on social media, and I think councillors Hamid included, but not so much Mayor Krantz.
There's a point about that. The talk of we need a strong mayor in Milton, and I think the one thing we need to keep in mind is the next 4 years, because the relationship between the municipalities, especially the 905 and Queen's Park, I'm predicting is probably going to be a very divisive one over the next 4 years. I see. I don't know of anything for certain, but let's just face it. This provincial government wants a lot of stuff from the municipalities, in particular with Milton, and we'll get into probably Peel a little bit further on. But Highway 413, the current provincial government wants to build it. This was an issue in the last term a bit. Milton kind of came down. They were initially opposed to it, then they flip-flopped and said now we are in favor of it. How big of an issue, Laura, is this going to play in terms of making sure that the town of Milton, which could have a big influence on the outcome of this, has a united voice in the and where they stand on Highway 413?
At this point, because I remember a conversation that we had about the 413, and after that, I went back and I looked through different things, through all the council minutes and all the video and stuff, and found out that they basically did the double negative, where you voted against something that the regional council had already voted against. So it was like you voted in favor of it. And there really is I think there's a bit of a division on that one. There's councillors that see it as progress as a highway that would bring people in and take people, as increasing commerce that way, and get people into town a little bit easier. But I don't know if that's going to be much of an issue versus there's a Reed Road, there's a quarry somebody wants to build reopen or build a quarry at Reed Road and Twist Road, which is just in Campbellville. I'm not sure how much. So in that light, I'm not sure the 413 is going to really is going to really pump it up. It's going to be a big issue. I think there's bigger fish to fry.
These kind of hyper local things tend to catch the attention. So quarries are always good for getting people angry, right? I think most, certainly Burlington has its quarry story. Most of the certainly the cities that border on the green belt and on the escarpment, obviously, all seem to have their quarry stories of one kind or another. Where would I mean, I guess with the debate about the CN rail hub, Mayor Krantz and I think most of council were kind of outwardly against that. So that they're against one kind of transportation but for another one, and it would seem that the more
there is with the sorry to interrupt, but the CN though there is a whole host of urban growth issues with that, and the first and foremost being one of the entrances, jurisdictional and urban planning issues. One of the big one, two of the big ones. One is at one point, I'm not sure if this is still the case, but at one point, one of the entrances to the facility was directly opposite a neighborhood that's been planned for years, and the jurisdictional issue is basically CN has decided that they're a federally regulated industry and they don't want to go through the regular planning procedures. And that means permits, that means appearances before councils and all that stuff.
So basically no one ever wants to deal with councils. It's just that, we have laws and you have to. But yeah, I mean, CN falls into that same realm as say airports do, without mentioning any particular highly litigious airport that might exist. They also fall under federal government and are kind of exempt from municipal jurisdiction. And it's kind of a loop. We have all these loopholes in our law where people manage to get out of the normal way in which things are done because they fall under another level of government, and it seems to be a real perennial problem. Anyway, we should probably move on to other parts of the 905. Just as we sort of wrap up on the Milton part of the episode, are there any other sort of interesting people running for council?
Yeah. Well, actually, just to go back to Milton a bit, I believe in Ward 3, Councillor Mike Cluett, he's actually being challenged by local councillor Rick DeLorenzo.
Yes, that's correct.
That's an interesting choice for Mr. DeLorenzo. Yeah. It didn't surprise me Samira Ali. It didn't surprise me Samira Ali went for the regional council spot as Councillor Hamid is running for mayor, but when I saw DeLorenzo's name, I thought, that's interesting, considering that Councillor Cluett won 80% of his re-election in 2018, and he pretty much owns that ward, quote unquote. So
so why would he do that then?
Yeah, Laura could probably answer that.
I honestly no idea. I can't even guess. If I were to guess, I would say the growth thing probably plays into it. He's been noticing that he's been aligning himself a little bit with Councillor Best, and Councillor Best, Councillor Best came up with the idea to kind of kick the debate over expanding urban boundaries in Milton down the road another few years. So that would be my guess. But
we're seeing a kind of pro growth, pro accelerated growth, and pro more moderate level of growth.
Yeah, sort of moderate, the moderate versus that's kind of what I suspect happened there, but I don't know for sure. That surprised me.
Before we pass on to the next topic, I do want to get your take, both you and Alan's take, on the Halton chair race, which kind of snuck up and became a bit of an what's going on here moment. For listeners, initially Gary Carr was going to retire or
it was heavily rumored. I mean, he never said anything, but it was heavily rumored.
Heavily rumored. He was not running. He was going to kind of gracefully walk out and leave that, and leave it to somebody else. To which Jane McKenna, Burlington MPP, said, "I'm not running for re-election in the last provincial election." Instead, she was declaring her intentions for regional chair, which all of a sudden Gary Carr comes in and says, "Guess what? I'm back." And kind of just, what's your take on all this? And also,
I think it's because of this the issue I mentioned before, the urban growth boundary, the vote on it. And it really, I think Jay McKenna might be one of the races where it really is kind of like this proxy war between the governing conservatives in Queen's Park and, I guess, local or progressive types who are, I guess, smart growth representation. Because, and there's an interesting political backstory here in that Gary Carr is a former progressive conservative MPP, former Speaker of the Ontario Legislature, who only got that job because the opposition at the time voted him in. He was a bit of a maverick in his own caucus. He actually left the PCs and became a Liberal MP for a cup of coffee before he was defeated for his federal election. And then he ended up becoming Halton Regional Chair and was, I guess, unopposed for a number of terms before I guess Jay McKenna stepped in.
Yeah, I mean, in the interest of just complete accuracy, he did have an opponent who is this time running against Marianne Mead Ward as a frequent flyer, Ann Marsden, who's run in many elections. But yeah, I with all, again, that phrase, with all due respect to Ann Marsden, he won extremely easily, I think we can say. I mean, it that's kind of how it strikes me. I think you described it really well. That it's kind of the Gary Carr is an old school progressive conservative guy, or progressive enough that he can also be a liberal sometimes. You know,
it should also be pointed out as well, though. It is a three-way race this year.
Yeah.
Because the third candidate who kind of caught us a bit, is rolling I a bit by surprise, is Andrea Grabance, who we've had on the podcast before. She's the former Halton District School Board chair. And yeah, she's no longer, she's clearly not running for this, her old ward seat for the Halton District School Board. And you know, is this going to be one of the more interesting races just because it's a three-way race?
I think she'd be the one to watch. I haven't met Jane. Anyway, I haven't met her. I haven't met the other competitor, but I've met Andrea, and I think she's the one to watch.
I tend to agree with you, mostly because like
she's very impressive.
Well, she was also the chair of the Halton Catholic School Board. She has connections.
Halton District.
Halton District. Yes, my apologies. You're right. Halton District School Board.
But an important distinction.
Yes, I know. But she has the connections within the school communities across that entire. Like, it's a large region. Jane's connections are primarily within the riding of Burlington, and not even. I wouldn't even say the city of Burlington. I would say the riding. The provincial riding of Burlington is where her network and her strength and power comes from. So I would agree, if people are looking for change at the Halton regional level, in you know, Andrea would probably be able to drum up a good number of support, or at least a good base to push forward with that.
My feeling, just throwing in my own, I mean, Andrea Grabance is someone of obvious ability. She made some good. She put Halton School Board on the map for some good reasons, which doesn't happen very often with school board stories. It tends to be that somebody's said something awful, and there were some notable kind of cases of that board under her leadership as chair. Really making some impactful statements to the province during COVID, and kind of not being willing to just put up with what was going from the province. The problem is that, as far as I can see, is that, you know, going from trustee level to regional chair level is a much bigger jump, and I don't see. I personally would have thought she would have been wiser to go for a council seat. Because no one has ever, run for the regional chair and beaten an incumbent yet, you've got to get votes from a massive area of the entire region. And most people have no idea who Andrea Grabentz is. Sure, you've got some parents who do, but that only gets you so far. It's impossible as someone who's never run before, who doesn't have a kind of background, to get the bodies who are going to go and knock on doors for you. So that would be the challenge, I see. I mean, I if I was proved wrong, if she was to win, I think she'd probably be the most interesting regional chair we'd had in a very long time. It would certainly be a breath of fresh air. I just think that the practicalities are that we may know she's an interesting candidate. How do you get that message to the voters who just are so... the regional chair race is just such a non-entity.
But I think she's got a shot because there's really only 3 candidates running, and if there were more candidates, that would dilute the vote, and it would have been harder for Andrea to get attention. But if she's just facing 2 people that are almost, in a sense, career politicians.
I think Jane McKenna has bitten off way more than she can chew here. I think she's massively overestimated her the affection with which she's held by the population, which I think is actually close to 0.
Wow.
Well, I mean,
that's a statement.
Jane McKenna couldn't get more than a couple hundred votes when she ran for council here. She became an MPP because Burlington elects Conservative MPPs, right? Or PC MPPs, and she was the first PC MP to actually be beaten, and fine, she won it back again because of her loyalty to Patrick Brown. Basically, that was her support for him, guaranteed that she got another kick at the can, and in a more favourable election, she won it back. But it's not about Jane McKenna. It's about Burlington being a generally strongly, not a strongly PC city anymore. Obviously, it's a marginal seat.
She relied on her conservative bona fides and the conservative machine to help push her through.
And I think she's thinking she can bank on those same connections for this regional chair race.
And it's not, again, I mean, in Milton, who knows who Jane McKenna is in Milton? I don't. Yeah, exactly.
You know what?
Who knows who she is in Oakville? Very few people.
On that note, let's move on to Peel. Alan, nothing's happening in Peel, right? End of story. Let's move on.
No, I wish nothing was happening in Peel. Make my job much easier. So I think everybody's looking at Brampton, but let me start from my hometown, Mississauga. I'm going to say flat out right. First of all, Bonnie Crombie is not losing. I'm pretty sure she's guaranteed a 3rd term. Her name is literally going to be the first name on a ballot when the ballots get printed. So.
Is there a contender there at all? I don't know of anyone other than Bonnie Crombie with a real name.
I don't see anybody that I recognize. There might be one named like Derek Ramke soon, may have run before in 2010 or 2014, but that was before I think Bonnie became the mayor. What people really need to focus on in Mississauga is the local races for council. There are 3 councillors that are not running again in wards 2, 9, and 11. Ward 2, you have at least 7 or I think 8 people contesting because that was a ward for former councillor Karen Raz, who stepped down in January to accept a job in the private sector. We'll get into that in a minute. But she was replaced by former councillor Pat Mullen, who was appointed for the duration of the term. The candidates running there are an eclectic mix. I know a guy named Alvin Tedjo. He is the former Ontario Liberal candidate, Ontario leadership candidate for the Liberals. There's also a woman named Sylvia Guaranteri, who coincidentally is Patrick Brown's mother-in-law. And and there's a lady named Sue Shanley who is involved in the ratepayers and residents association. So she's got those ties with the residents groups, and in Ward 2, where it's South End Mississauga, the connections to homeowners associations and ratepayers groups are a little more important. I'm very interested to see what Sylvia Guaranteri, how she would do, because as I mentioned, she, I believe, is Patrick Brown's mother-in-law. Patrick's wife, Genevieve Guaranteri, is, I think, her daughter. So she looks like she has conservative connections based on, I think Patrick Brown showed up at her launch. So obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ward 9 is Pat Sato retiring after 31 years in office. So Pat Sato has clearly endorsed someone. She endorsed a local activist by the name of Martin Reed. He would probably be the first black man elected to, well, in that ward at least, if he was to be elected. But Ward 9 has, oh, this is good. Ward 9 has about 11 candidates, ranging from school trustee Noka Dagrub, former Liberal MPP Bob Delaney, and former NDP provincial candidate Nicholas Raba. Raba Fine Foods is the family where he's from. Oh, and also a gentleman by the name of Peter McCallion. Now, if that name sounds familiar, that is Hazel McCallion's son. He registered on the deadline. So yes, Peter McCallion, I believe he's around 69 years old or 68, and he's in the real estate industry. And if anybody remembers,
there's a story there, isn't there?
About 8 years ago, he had a bit of a real estate transaction that he tried to get through with the city, and I think at the time his mother tried to get involved, and this led to a whole kerfuffle with conflict of interest allegations, and Hazel dodged a bullet on that one as well. But yes, Peter McCallion, her son, is contesting for councillor in Ward 9. Very interesting to see how that turns out.
Yeah, well, you got to say there's some candidates of stature there between those races. I mean, like Alvin Tedjo. I mean, fair enough, he's never won an election yet, but he's running.
Yeah, no, he hasn't won yet.
He ran for the leadership.
He did run in 2014. Actually, he did run in 2014. He built somewhat of a base there. He's from the ward. Actually, I think there are allegations that some of these other candidates in Ward 2 are not from the ward. And in a ward like that, that's a little more important. I also want to mention Ward 11. Former federal conservative MP Brad Butt is contesting Ward 11. So there's a lot of former.
Isn't he originally from out west?
Brad Butt? No, yeah. He's from Mississauga. He was the federal MP for Mississauga Streetsville for a term under Stephen Harper, but he lost in 2015.
What? Sorry, no. Finish your thought, Alan, and then I'm going to chime in.
And I think one more ward to watch. And full disclosure, I'm helping a candidate in this ward. Is Ward 6. This is Councillor Ron Starr's ward, as in Ron Key Car Star, or the Keymaster, as I like to call him. So Mr. Keymaster is running against a guy named Joe Hornick, former banker, current resident of Ward 6.
Is there a story behind that nickname? Sorry to interrupt.
I made that up.
Okay. Just a refresher on the Karen Rass story.
Ron Starr was accused by Karen Rass, who I mentioned before, the Ward 2 councillor. She stepped down in January. The reason she stepped down, she later revealed, was that her car was vandalized up to 7 or 8 times in the space of 2 years in the city's underground parking lot. And she accused Councillor Ron Starr of keying her car. So the city had not launched an investigation before because Councillor Rass wanted to keep it private, according to the mayor. When this was blown up in the press earlier this year, the Integrity Commissioner was called and he started an investigation. That investigation concluded a few months ago, and this is all on public record. The IC's report said that Ron Starr did vandalize Councillor Raz's car. Based on the evidence that was provided, Ron Starr's lawyer and Mr. Starr is contesting those allegations. He still denies that he did this. And I believe there are currently some lawsuits that Mr. Starr is pursuing with various parties. That's the extent of the knowledge that I know of. But yes, you would think that Councillor Starr would probably focus on his legal issues than running for re-election, but that's what he did. And
what I do.
And so he is running against who I mentioned, Mr. Hornick, and a third candidate named Mohammed Kamil, who, if you Google his name on Facebook, you will find that he actually was door knocking and handing out flyers for Joe Hornick in the 2018 election. So there's three candidates there. I'm impressed that Joe has managed to maybe quote unquote scare off any other possible challengers, because you'd think if you've got an embattled incumbent like this, you would see a whole bunch of people jumping in. But I think the consolidation against Mr. Starr has focused on Mr. Hornick, and I think
I want to just jump in and then make a comment here. And this is something that we mentioned in the last episode, was the number of federal or provincial politicians, failed provincial or federal politicians, who are now jumping into the federal scene, municipal scene, as almost like, is it a consolation prize? Is it like, I cannot not, it's the only job I know. All I know is how to politic and how to campaign. So if there's no option at the provincial or federal level, well, I'm just going to bum around my hometown and find a ward seat somewhere that I can sit in. Like, what I was wondering, what do any of these people possibly bring to the table in terms of a vision or an idea for Mississauga, other than the fact of, well, I was also at this level of power, so you should give me the seat at this level of power.
Well, I mean, if you're upset about Brad Butt in Ward 11 and Bob Delaney in Ward 9, you should look at Brampton. I can move on to there, because there's a number of candidates running in Brampton who were either failed nomination candidates who ran previously for federal MP, or who whatever. There are two former NDP candidates that I know of who are running for ward councillors in the city of Brampton.
And I guess, I mean, to be fair, I guess, you know, most people who go into politics don't win on the first kick of the can, right? And you
exactly.
need to keep on going if at first you don't succeed and so on. So,
and like in the case of Bob Delaney, he didn't really he lost in 2018, but he didn't jump right in to run for a city council spot in the same year. I mean, he waited. I mean, it's been 4 years, so I don't know. Maybe he just thinks he's got a shot because it's an open ward and there's a base of support there. But in Brampton, in Brampton, it's just fascinating to me because Patrick Brown is on the ballot again after having been kicked out of the federal conservative leadership race.
Shocking.
There were a number of candidates that kind of jumped out at the last second because they realized that Patrick Brown probably isn't going to win. The only name on there is a woman named Nikki Kaur. Now, your listeners may not be aware of this, but Nikki Kaur was the whistleblower who blew the whistle, so to speak, on Patrick Brown's shenanigans up in City Hall for the past year, ranging from allegations that Patrick Brown was getting city staff to work on Peter MacKay's federal conservative leadership to his own conservative leadership campaign this year, allegations that Patrick Brown used his influence to hire failed region of Niagara employees into the city of Brampton. So it's all that whole swirling thing. Your friend Sam Graywell at The Pointer has done extensive reporting on this issue. Yeah. He will know exactly who Nikki Kaur is. So here's the thing. Nikki Kaur's campaign manager, as far as I understand it, is a guy named Nick Kovalis, he who ran Doug Ford's leadership campaign, or he who ran Doug Ford's re-election campaign this past June, as well as currently also managing somehow John Tory's re-election at the same time. If you follow Nick Kovalis' tweets, he said that he had a lot of dirt. It's almost as though Nick Kovalis is running for Brampton mayor, and not this poor woman Nikki Kaur. I feel like she's almost like a
proxy civil war almost.
A proxy war. It's almost like a proxy war. I'm very interested to see how this unfolds.
I mean, this is conservative against conservative, and nothing gets nastier than conservative.
It's like I can't make this up, right?
I'm not gonna. I don't know of anything for sure, but doesn't this just reek of Doug Ford playing a little bit of behind the scenes? I want to turf out my hated enemy, Patrick Brown. Because I think Ford wants to keep John Tory. It's like Nick, go out and work your magic and get my people at the municipal level where I need them to be, so that my job is easier as premier.
But Alan, I think
Here's the thing, though.
The day that Patrick Brown was kicked out of the leadership, Nick Wallace tweeted out, basically, I thought he was being sarcastic, but it turns out to be real. He said, if you can formulate a coherent sentence and are in support of Highway 413 and want to be the mayor of Brampton, DM me immediately. So he was saying, at that time, he was saying, I want a mayoral candidate to back, and you have to support Highway 413. So, I mean, the provincial agenda is right there. Yeah. And he wants to pick a municipal standard bearer that will support that.
I don't know. My theory, and again, it goes back to reporting I did on the Milton campaign. My theory as to why he was thrown out of the race was it actually had to do with the names on his nomination papers, that maybe somebody did some investigating and found out that one or two of them might be fraud.
Let me put it this way.
Completely theoretical.
I will say that if we had a more what's the word I'm looking for? If there were more journalists still on the pay of newspapers in this province, and there were, people such as yourself, Laura, with the time getting paid to investigate leadership elections and whose names are on things like nomination papers, who donates, who pays for the memberships, that would be a very interesting line of investigation, and not just for the PCs, for probably any of the political parties. There are rules and laws written in the province of Ontario that I suspect are routinely not enforced during leadership elections, and it's not right. It's not right. I mean, somehow this is just seen as an acceptable way of doing business. But
to bring that back down to ground, so to speak. So what is Brampton going to be left with? Is Brampton going to be left with nepotism or obedience? Nepotism to Patrick Brown or obedience to Doug Ford? Is that how it works?
Well, I don't know. The sort of divisions we've seen around Brampton City Council the past year, they've really been out in the open. I thought Brampton Council had divisions before, but this is even worse. You have one councillor being accused of sexual harassment. He's still on the ballot. Two councillors are not running again. One of them had actually withdrawn on the day of the registration. I think he said he wanted to fulfill a term limit pledge or something. But I think what we're seeing is that there is maybe some attempt by Patrick Brown to get councillors elected that are supportive of him, because this past couple of months he's been dealing with divisions on council because one of the councillors left, and he was left with a 5-5 split on council. So there were 5 councillors that were pushing for the firing of the integrity commissioner in that city, and as well as pushing for the firing of the very controversial former city manager, who was a alleged Patrick Brown loyalist. So because those things happened, and then there was a whole controversy about a filling a council seat, because one of the councillors was elected as a PC MPP in June. Mm-hmm. That never went through because councillors just refused to meet, and so they were denied the quorum. That's kind of we're just left now with the election has to solve all of this. See,
that's usually how it goes, though. Is the elections are where we're supposed to solve all the problems that we have at whatever level that we're voting for.
But my understanding is, Alan, I mean, you had some polling data on your website this week, and I thought, that after all the scandal and everything, and the fact that Patrick Brown has taken, he didn't want to go to Brampton in the first place. It was his third choice of job. The minute he could apply for a better job, so to speak, he was trying to get out of Brampton again. And he keeps on ending up back in Brampton because they're the only people who have him. I thought, well, surely to God, this doesn't look good for him. They're going to want somebody else. But I mean, according to your polling data, he's going to walk home.
I mean, that poll was from Main Street Research, and it was included decided and undecided voters. So, but still, yes, Mayor Brown is still miles ahead. He has between 40 to 60% of the vote, and 40% compared to the other ones who are compared to potential challengers in the low teens. I mean, that's pretty much a majority government in standard parliamentary election in this country. But if you're walking away with 60%, it's just name recognition at the end of the day. If you follow Patrick Brown's social media, he is at every freaking single event in the city of Brampton. Like if you went to the opening of an envelope, he would probably be there.
I was gonna say, is there a baby he hasn't kissed yet?
You see this guy show up at random weddings for people like everywhere. So it's amazing to me as someone who observes.
It worked for Trudeau.
It did.
Yeah. And Patrick
Brown
also,
I believe Woody Allen once said 90% of time is just you show up, and that's how you become successful. So I think that was the quote.
And Patrick Brown is certainly, his whole career has been built on that kind of personal connections with individuals, with community groups. He did it when he became leader of the PC. It's like no one thought he had a chance of doing that, and he did it purely by and to give him credit where it's due, through hard work. It's just a shame he doesn't show the talent for actual governing that he shows at getting people to sign up for memberships. But yeah, I mean, it seems, and I don't think there's any politician in Ontario probably who's better at reaching out into different ethnic groups, different religious groups, and making connections there, and kind of persuading them to be loyal to him. It really is quite a phenomenon that I think other people, such as Stephen Del Duca to an extent, have tried to emulate and not nearly been nearly as successful with. So there's something there, but it's just when it comes to the politics of Patrick Brown, it's like I kind of feel with Brampton, it's like, seriously, guys, do you not have some civic pride that wouldn't it be nice to have a mayor who wants to be here? But I don't know.
Yeah,
I think maybe it's just the overall Canadian general ability to forgive and forget, and just to give people a second, third, fourth chance, maybe. And it looks like the Brantonians are willing to give this guy a couple more chances before they tire of him eventually. You did mention Stephen Del Duca. I could talk a little bit about that.
Please do. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Well, in York Region, it looks like Stephen Del Duca has completed his transition from being the former Liberal Party leader to a almost Ford supporting conservative type, because he is running for mayor of Vaughan. And he has scrubbed his social media from all the red that's available and converted himself to a blue guy. He's doing videos.
And the colors are very Ford colors.
Shirt saying he wants to fight congestion, he wants to fight traffic.
Yeah.
I mean, if he is out there supporting Highway 413 at this point, I'm not surprised. I mean, he wants to be the mayor of Vaughan. Because the current mayor, Maurizio Bevilacqua, is stepping down, so he's not running again. And and that's why Stephen Del Duca is running. He's probably the most recognizable name on the ballot.
But I will say this: we looked at his website and his platform, and podcast listeners, you can't see it, but I'm holding up my air quotes. His platform is basically just anti-gridlock, and a lot of his plans to combat that gridlock rests at the provincial level. A lot of it has to or he's going to have to go across regional lines or regional platforms to try and fix it. It's ambitious and bold and wonderful, but I look and say it's too big for one mayor to take on.
As somebody who put some of my time helping a Liberal candidate in the recent provincial election, it's a little embarrassing for me to see the former leader of this party kind of almost grovel at the hand of the king, or the king known as Doug Ford, because he wants support to become the mayor. I will say he is running against the current councillor by the name of Sandra Rackle, who I believe if she would get elected would be the first Chinese Canadian woman to lead the city of Vaughan. Her maiden name is Sandra Yun, but she married a former Liberal MPP by the name of Mario Rackle, who coincidentally is also running for regional councillor in the same election his wife is now contesting for mayor in. There was a former Liberal MP by the name of Deb Schultz who was on the ballot, but she withdrew because she had a recurrence of cancer, and she announced on press release that she has to go and get herself healthy and cannot run a mayoral campaign.
Well,
Uh,
we wish her all
but,
the
yeah.
best, that's for sure, in her
Yeah,
recovery.
but actually,
Yeah.
there's something very interesting going on in Markham and Richmond Hill. Let me start with Markham because it went for the longest time that there was almost nobody on the ballot running for mayor. And my understanding was Mayor Frank Scarpitti was running again, and he always waits until the last moment to register, probably because he wants to do that to try to make sure that nobody else runs, so he can just get a claim. But at the last moment, somebody is running against him. His name's Don Hamilton. He is a current regional councilor and the deputy mayor of Markham. He was a former ward local councilor. So it is now a two-person race for the mayor of Markham, which I think is very interesting because Mayor Scarpitti's opponent isn't just some random fringe person. It's somebody who served with him on council. It's somebody who, if you wanted a change, but maybe not that much, if you just don't like Frank, maybe you will vote for Don. So I'm very interested to see how the campaign unfolds there. And finally, in Richmond Hill, it seems it's, I believe, one local activist group described it as a litigation field because it seems like a number of incumbents who are running have gotten into either legal problems or have been arrested or are currently suing the city of Richmond Hill. Mayor David West, who just won the January by-election to fill the mayoral seat after the previous mayor stepped down for health reasons, he's running against incumbent regional councilor Carmine Pirelli. Mr. Pirelli is currently suing the city of Richmond Hill and various former staffers, his current council colleagues, except two of them, for I think it was something to do with him using $140,000 for a green bin program that was not approved by the city, and he was reprimanded, and now he's suing the city he wants to leave. There are also currently two councillors who are running for re-election. One was just had to, I think she was fined $5,000 for some reason. I can't remember what. But the other councillor running for re-election was recently stopped at a TTC stop on his way back from I think a baseball game by TTC
Yep, I remember
people.
that story. Yep.
And he looked like he was resisting arrest. So I don't know.
I'm gonna have to jump in there.
Yeah,
I see we're coming up.
jump in.
We're coming up on our time for the episode. So I'm gonna. Yeah, I think we're gonna have to stop it at Richmond Hill. I think that's as far east as we'll go in the 905. But Alan and Laura, thank you so much for coming back onto the podcast. To both of you at the same time, nonetheless, so we can have a real fulsome discussion about the races. We'll probably reach out to you guys again before the election happens to just talk about what's going to transpire.
Why are you suing? Why are you running for council for the city that you're suing? Is what I wondered about Richmond Hill.
I don't know. It's not the first time this.
We'll discuss it.
All right,
We'll discuss it afterwards.
Continue.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks very much,
I'm
everyone.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Thanks.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
Looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.